you've heard it there from the man himself, Julius Malema, and for his normal demeanor, appearing unbothered by this collapse of talks between his party as well as ActionSA. What do you make of his comments?
Well, I think he's positioned himself in terms of what has been the standard response by the EFF in terms of the fact that they've always taken that position that, you know, they're not going to be deterred, they're not going to be undermined, or they're not going to allow these kinds of coalition talks or anything to deter them from what their national goal is. And he emphasized an interesting interpretation of how national issues apply themselves or find themselves located within the municipality and local government issues, and he said they're not completely separated from each other. They are more symbiotic. I think at the end of the day, it raises for me the question of, if you're going to be on the outside and you're going to be the checks and balances, you're going to make sure that in those councils where you're not in a coalition, how you actually then hold that coalition that's in power or working in a coalition arrangement, how you hold it together and how you hold it accountable. But I also think at the end of the day, it would be interesting to hear the EFF's leader's position on, you know, the wards. I mean, wards are very important in terms of local government, in terms of how you actually deal as the interface between the cold face of what's happening on the ground, right, and those issues that he had raised in terms of governance, accountability, and more importantly, the issues of service delivery.
And as we continue to get more reaction, I also want to play a clip now from ActionSA leader, that's Herman Mashaba.
You know, for us as ActionSA, we made it abundantly clear because we're a party that represents 2.4 million South Africans who gave us the mandate to start this political party. And their message was loud and clear to say, please, whatever you do, your mission is to remove the ANC. And the proposal given to us by the EFF, when we looked at it, it unfortunately bringing the ANC through the back door. And we felt very uncomfortable, and we had to put it to the Senate last night, and Senate unanimously said no deal, because we would not really want to be associated with the ANC.
Now, Sanusha, it's quite important to bear in mind that it has been nearly 2 weeks since the municipal elections, and parties are still in the midst of coalition talks after 66 of these 213 municipalities were left hung. Can we read anything in terms of the timing of it and how it seems that these talks are taking a while longer than what was expected? And what options does Mashaba have at this point?
Yeah, quite rightly so. I think the time is ticking on this one, 2 weeks from the time in which the election was proclaimed by the IEC. I think it's this Thursday, if I'm not mistaken, that these coalitions have to start having some level of formation coming together. And at this point in time, we'll have to see where that's going in terms of the Electoral Act and the role of COPTA and so forth. But you do have one coalition that's already been signed in the Cedarburg region in the Western Cape. So there's 65 of them to go. But some of these are small municipalities where they can actually, depending on what the coalition arrangement is like, you can see them work more smoothly. Others are more complex and complicated, right, like in Gauteng. But I think going forward for Mr. Mashaba and ActionSA, it would be to look around and see, particularly in Johannesburg, in Tshwane, where he does have the ability to work with the DA. The Freedom From Plus would come through there as well. But then it also makes it much more not, I wouldn't say fragile, but it means that the negotiations has to be expanded a little bit, because if you want a 50% plus one, right, a majority dominant coalition, you're going to end up talking to smaller political parties with 2.6% and so forth. So it becomes quite an expanded way. Whereas if you were able to just have three parties go in and establish that 50% threshold and over, then of course it's an easier fit. So it'll be something that I think are we taking this close to midnight in terms of when these hung councils need to establish the quorum and establish the coalition.
I also want us to reflect a bit on the ActionSA, the new kid on the block, their performance as we wrap up our discussion. I mean, they've of course exceeded the expectations of many political pundits, having bagged about 2.8% of all the votes in the country. Now, the party did considerably well in Johannesburg, now being the third biggest party behind the ANC as well as the DA. Let's reflect a bit on that party's performance.
Yeah, I think it astounded all of us. I know some of the members, took me to task on that and said, no, you got it wrong. And yeah, I think we didn't, for me personally, we knew they were going to do well, but perhaps in the way that they've built inroads into particular areas, like in Soweto, like in the areas that in the councils and municipalities that they contested, they did fairly well. And I think it's nothing to dismiss in this context, because being the new party, having been formed in such a small space of time, and managed to create the traction on the ground also tells you what the electorate is looking for. I think going forward, it would be interesting to look at how they engage in coalitions, what kind of accountability they bring to, and stability they bring to coalitions, but more importantly, I think watching how they morph onto the national scene in 2024 will be quite important to track as well.
Well, Sanusha, always a pleasure chatting to you. That's Sanusha Naidu, who's a political analyst, unpacking those coalition talks as they continue. And of course, talks between the EFF as well as ActionSA have since collapsed.